Hello, everyone. Today we are live with my good friend James Annito, who is a renowned demonologist, author, paranormal investigator, founder of the Dominion Ministry that has spent over 2 decades investigating and um, researching the phenomenon we call paranormal. So, James, what made you want to study demonology?
That's a good question because it's not a normal thing. I never grew up with a haunting or anything like that. My upbringing into the paranormal itself was trauma, and that trauma then just led me down a rabbit hole of looking into theology, then you know, understanding the concept of demons and angels and good versus evil. I there was something about evil, in a preternatural sense, but even in a humanistic sense, like humans, that just fascinated me because trauma just doesn't come uh, sometimes from accidents; it comes from people that cause it to you. So I found it fascinating, and when I started getting into paranormal investigation as a hobbyist at first, I was doing it to kind of figure out questions that I had internally based upon a lot of my early upbringing and reading of literature. And so when I got involved in it, I would say professionally, like actually starting a team and, advertising ourselves and trying to get investigations, eventually became upon a private case and something went off in my head and said like, well, um, what happens if gathering data, or what some people call evidence, and showing it to the client, saying, "Hey, you're not crazy. You're actually dealing with something. We can't explain it, of course, but this is what we've got, and based on uh, what we did." And I thought, well, maybe that's not what they just sometimes want. Sometimes they want help, and so I really kind of started blending like my religious faith that I garnished at as a young adult, and I said, okay, well, maybe I can help people. And around the time that I actually thought about that, I got involved with a demonologist named Carl Johnson, and I'm a very big techie, so we became acquainted through a mutual friend that was the co-founder of the group I founded with him, and I knew his brother Keith. There, he has a twin, Keith, who is also a demonologist. They were on the first couple seasons of Ghost Hunters, and known as the first investigators of the Conjuring House. So I knew of them, and I knew of that. And uh, Carl asked me, and his co-founder Dina Palazzina at the time asked me to become on the tech manager. So working with him and kind of that insight of going further is what kind of got me into demonology, in the applied sense, right? Applying the study, because I've always been studying demonology. I've always been interested in good versus evil and cultural traditions of wicked spirits. But, applying that study just from reading books to actually then dealing with it hands on, it became a reality.
Very true. So, this is something I just jotted down. How has demonology changed from its historical roots to modern day practice?
Well, demonology has changed in some essence greatly and not much differently. In Mesopotamian times, you had exorcists called the Isipu, and so people still believe back in the cradle civilization, which is over 4,000 years ago. Led to believe that demons or deities or entities could possess them, and there were these specific healers, and you see these specific healers or exercisers throughout time. So in that essence, it hasn't changed in the ritual sense and the spirituality belief of it. But where it has changed is, of course, the adaptation and advancement of science, and using science and natural circumstances to outweigh the possibility of there something being preternatural, what most people know it as supernatural. But I think in that essence, it has changed it. There are some people that still carry the old ways, but in the essence, is like science has melded with theology um, and belief and as well a study. And so demonology has changed in that sense because with the explosion of demonic fantasy and horror and you know
Mm.
books and of course music, some people gravitate towards that. So now it's demonology is about discerning instead of pleading to somebody's beckoning call of being possessed, and it likely might not be. So that's where it has changed, right? And of course, where demonology got popularized was the Middle Ages, and you had the Inquisition, you had King James a little later on, within that period of 1200 to like 1600. um, you saw an explosion in demonology. You saw the Inquisition. You saw the Salem witch trials. Kind of demonology being applied and condemning people and going up against people that had different religions. So it's had its ups and downs throughout history, but it definitely has changed. I think the science has been very great addition to demonology because we know a lot more about our mind, uh, our body, and the things that we can externally possibly resonate.
I do. Here's one. So, have you ever had a case that made you want to quit, and what made you decide to stay in the ministry? If you have,
uh, I would say no case has caused me concern to want to quit. Like I have taken breaks throughout my 2+ decades of doing this. I've had to take breaks. It's dark work. I am a person, and sometimes I make mistakes and bad decisions. And when you're in certain mindsets as a human, you shouldn't be handle other people's dark issues. So I've taken breaks, but there's necessarily been no case that has scared me made me want to quit. I enjoy helping people. I do it free of charge. If I can be a mediator between them and their faith in overcoming this affliction, then I'm doing a good deed, in my opinion, for the universe. But you know, I would say that even my first demonic possession case, my true first demonic case in general, um, until that point, I was still on the fence of believing if it existed or not, because I'd never came across it. I came across maybe negative cases or maybe cases that maybe were thought of the mind. And that case actually, of course, did a number on me, psychologically, physically, and spiritually. But it strengthened my faith. It actually empowered me to believe that there is a God or a higher power, because this stuff does exist. And so it made my faith stronger. So there's no case that made me want to quit. I've just taken periodic breaks throughout time, just to recollect myself and fix my human mistakes.
cool. Um, so what are some of the signs that, like, what part of the signs did movies actually get right for when a demon is supposedly in the house with you?
Yeah, quite a couple movies to be honest with you. Most of them are entertainment, of course, but The Exorcist had some truths to it.
Mm.
Nefarious had a lot of truths to it. It's a recent movie, a great movie. The Exorcism of Emily Rose had some truths to it. The show Evil, the first couple seasons, had some truths to it. So there are forms of media out there that depict it almost to some truths. But what I've always liked to say and what I've heard, so I'm going to emulate what I've heard, and is that sometimes what you see on the movies is not as scary as what it is in person. And so I would say that there is some good depictions of it. and some that will, transcend pop culture, like The Exorcist has, and now the Conjuring series. But you know, uh, there are added elements that do happen. Actually, a good one too. I didn't say, and I can't believe I forgot it. Another good one is The Right. The movie with Anthony Hopkins has some good connecting points of really what can happen with like the frogs appearing, the nails coming out. Like those are things that have been experienced by exorcists or even demonologists. So, they do have good depictions. Sometimes they actually do have people that do this and consult, and you can usually tell which movies have had that, especially if you're involved in demonology. But I find all of them entertaining and joyful to a degree, because sometimes you got to get a good laugh of what they think of it than truly what it truly is. But yeah, it was a good question. But yeah, nothing really that I can think of, and I don't challenge that. I don't want a case to come to me that will make me quit. But truly, I haven't come across one.
It makes total sense. So, how do you differentiate, pardon me, between a genuine paranormal affliction to a severe psychological or medical condition?
And that is really sometimes the most difficult point, because usually people with psychological issues, that tend to believe that there's a demon there, is hard to have them escape away from that and do all the things that you need them to do. Like usually, if I get an email, and that's most of the case in time scenario, I get an email, maybe a Facebook Messenger, and they say I'm possessed by a demon. I will say, hey, well, I have a process. You have to fill this questionnaire out. But I also, if you have a therapist or psychiatrist, like, you need to show to me that you had a psychological evaluation. And if you don't, unfortunately, I'm not able to help you. It's not that I'm not willing, but if you're not willing to give me that or take that step, then you're not going to probably listen to me towards the end when I give you advice. You're going to want to do what you want to do, because it's not what you want to do. So in that essence, when people deny your assistance and make they think that you're going to think they're crazy, tend to be the people that might be having psychological issues, because I have had people that, might have believed they're possessed and went through those processes and listened to me every step of the way. And those technically might have been the same people. But one thing that I know nowadays in modern times, where demonology has changed, back to your previous question, is the fact that the mental health crisis we have now, and especially in the United States of America, but the whole world, is quite significant than it used to ever be. So a lot of people have something that could be situated from the DSM-5, which is the Manual to Determine Disorders. So most people have a disorder nowadays, or neurodivergent or something. A good chunk of people are, and not everybody, but a good chunk of people are. And so you're always gonna have to understand the psyche of a person to understand the spiritual aspect of it. And if there are both at play, you have to handle both as well. So it's the difficult thing. So both can coexist at the same time, but you have to deal with both and be proactive in dealing with both, to overcome what you are being afflicted with. Um, but if usually there are red flags in a questionnaire or a conversation with the client that will tend to make me believe, that there might be psychological issues at play, even if they're not claiming to be possessed. And I always still give the benefit of the doubt. If they're within reach, I can get there. If they're not, I try to get other people involved or set something up in the future that I can, deal with my schedule and my busy life, as well, as being a father and having a career. So, but there's some people you can just tell, but to really get to nitty gritty, that's really the cause and effect relationship of a situation. Like if I get involved, depending on how severe it is, I try at least to figure a cause and effect, what caused it, and this is the effect of it. Because if you can figure that out, if there was a trauma, um, or a psychological issue, if you could figure that out, you could see why maybe there was a hole within them, or they did something. and that usually can tend to help alleviate the situation, especially if you can understand what they did wrong or possibly stumbled upon to deal with this issue.
Very cool. Uh, So this next question kind of just wait no, I just did that one, but let's see. All right. This next question's kind of like along the same situation as that one, but what are some of the most psychological misidentifications people make when they think their house is haunted?
So you're talking about people that claim their house to be haunted? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking.
Yeah, so I know you had Lloyd Albark on, and I do have a little love of parapsychology. I am actually a psychology major. I am 4 classes away from getting my master's. I have a bachelor's in it. So I love psychology. I actually wrote a book called "The Psychological Dimensions of the Paranormal," and I do believe that the psyche has a lot to do with the haunting, demonic wise, or even maybe an intelligent haunting. I think that Charles Dickens said it once in a pamphlet novel called Haunted House, was that the human is the battery to a haunting, right? If you pull that human out, does something happen? We hear the stories of somebody walking past a proclaimed haunted house, they see a shadow figure or something move. But is that the psyche interpreting that because they've heard the folklore and the myth and that is what they want to see? Or or is that stepping on that property activating some sort of echo? I tech technically think that trauma can also project. People can also project. There have been pieces of recorded history of tulpas, egregores, poltergeist, thought forms. So sometimes I feel as well that if we believe something to be such, we can manifest this and project it, and then in time these things become intelligent. Before artificial intelligence was in science fiction and then became a reality, it was a metaphysical term, which connects to thought form. And so I think sometimes we can create these things, or if a place has an echo, what I call echo, which is a haunted location, that there's something there that resonates and then binds to somebody that activates it or maybe communicates with it. But at times as well, I think sometimes what we bring in as baggage can amplify that echo or that haunting, because where that battery, it's like a good analogy would be if I take the batteries out of my remote right now and try to turn my television on, there's a good chance that, unless there's a miracle, that my TV's not going to turn on. But once I put the battery in it, energize it, the television turns on. There's that kind of give and take of a haunting. So, uh, for people to believe their house is haunted, it might not be, but over time, if left unchecked, who knows what they could be dealing with? They could be dealing with something. I find the human element to the paranormal quite significant. We, as humans, tend to make ourselves the utmost, most important creature on Earth. Hell, we are very damn smart. There's a lot we are capable of doing, but at the end of the day, sometimes we put ourselves on a pedestal when at the end of the day, we're all fighting each other and one step chance of nuking each other into disparity. So we are smart, but we also have a lot of issues. But the human element's hugely important. And I always joke about this, and I say this when questions like this come into play. If the human element of it wasn't a part of the level of haunting or being haunted, why don't we have ghost dinosaurs? It's because we never had an emotional attachment to dinosaurs when they existed. Yes, we love Jurassic Park, and as kids, depending on what era you grew up and dinosaurs were starting to be discovered, it became a pop culture thing. But nobody emotionally had pet dino as a troglodyte that we know of. And but when it comes to like animals, we do have emotional connections, and at times we do feel their presence or maybe capture something. And once again, there's the human element, because there was a connection to a human possibly, or a location where that animal might have had a part of the presence of that property, and there was emotions and memories that were imprinted into that either the materials there, aka stone tape theory, but there's so many different elements and theories that we could equate to uh, the psychology and the paranormal and how it interacts and also creates.
Very true. So, you mentioned this earlier about studying under Carl Johnson. So what was the most impactful piece of advice or methodology he passed down to you?
Um, how to be analytic and critical thinking, and as well attempt to be book smart. And understand what people have said and done. Physically, though, an applied situation, one of the cases that stick with me the most, and it kind of equates to the psychology aspect of it, but also the idea of thinking something is there. But we went to this case, I think it was in Connecticut, or Western Massachusetts. It was within that vicinity, I believe, and it was quite of a distance. And we got there, and we're checking, and there's this smell. One of their claims was a smell, aggravation, and stuff felt like being seen. And we got there and we smelled it. They seemed like normal people, but I'm very inquisitive. Like, if I'm there to investigate or observe, I'm going to do a walkthrough of the property. I'm going to see how they live, what's out there. Is there medicines or paraphernalia out that maybe they're doing that is aiding to this. I want to know the natural explanations before I jump to anything paranormal. And I stumble upon this room that was shut, and I walk in there, and there has to be a dozen cats,
Wow.
and I got a huge whiff of a smell, and I'm like, and I just had this moment of realization. And mind you, we sat on the couch, we touched their furniture. I had a realization that, and this is with Carl and Dina, the realization was that the smell, the hallucinations are all stemming from ammonia. It's cat piss, and the cat pisses everywhere, even on the couch we sat on. And I realized that, and I told Carl and Dina, I was like, well, I just discovered like a dozen cats, and that smell you smell is likely ammonia. It's cat piss, cat urine. And we looked at each other after we just sat on the couch and all that stuff, which also smell and likely had cat urine on it without being cleaned. If it was cleaned, that stuff stays. It's hard to get cat urine out. If anybody's ever had cats before, it's almost impossible. It's on fabric. You have to basically sometimes get rid of the fabric. Um, and that was a learning experience, because even though these people were very sincere about their experience, and up front felt very sane, it showed me, dealing with that case with Carl, that not everything uh, can be emotionally brought in, and like you want to help them, because sometimes you can't help them. The best thing you can do is to tell them, hey, well, you can't have a dozen cats. One, wherever that was, is probably illegal. I think 6 cats is mandatory in most states, if not less. And so, but you have to throw your furniture out or get Stanley Steamer in here or something. But we left in a hurry. Like, we just said that we don't feel anything or whatever. We kind of lied to them, but it was to sugarcoat the fact that we can't just come out and say, "Well, your house is just effing disgusting, and this is why you're experiencing it." But that was one case that I always reflect upon with Carl, because it really was an eye opener, literally, of course, with the smell of ammonia, but it gave me insight that you can't help everybody.
Exactly. S what is your take on, like, how do you feel about people, like, who are bad in life are gonna be bad, like in the afterlife? Like, do you believe good and evil, sort of?
I to a degree can believe in that. Like, I believe something unexplainable happens. Like, I believe in a lot of the same theories people do, but I always say I could believe in it, but I could be proven wrong, and I'd be all fine. I'd be fine with it. I tell a lot of people the best answer for this is I don't know, but I definitely think if consciousness can linger, or however whatever lingers, um, we call it consciousness or energy, but however that lingers, where our intelligence or um, our emotions stay with us, imprinted into this, or roaming the lands, so to say, in a spirit form. I definitely feel like that whatever you put in as a meat body, a human person living and physical, if we in fact did somehow become imprisoned, or it was a purgatorial thing, or that we imprinted on the land, that negative emotion would be imprinted into that land, or this person that was negative in life still roaming would be negative in that form as well. And I agree to it to an extent, because I've come across things or cases where we came up with a conclusion, and a prime example would be this gentleman that lived downstairs from his grandmother, and his grandmother passed away, and he took over the whole house, and he was starting to experience things, and I was brought in into that case. Everybody was thinking it to be demonic, and he thought it to be demonic. He was swearing at whatever was happening, and I am very privy to work with everybody. I do tend to use mediums in times of my cases as another form of lens. I won't always 100% rely on what they say. I will use it as a piece to compile everything that I've collected. But in that case, I had multiple mediums involved, because I was at a stump. I was at a crossroads of, like, okay, this is happening. I'm not necessarily experiencing it, but feels sincere about it. This team that brought me in caught some stuff. I experienced things, and I find them to be, respectable. And so after like a couple mediums, like I think maybe like a half a dozen, if not more, um, every single one of their conclusions, and most of them, if not any of them, knew each other, said that it's the grandmother, and
Mhm.
it's the grandmother, and when six different, or half a dozen or so people say the same thing, not knowing each other, saying it's the grandmother, she's mad that he's swearing, and overreacting. And as soon as we kind of like presented them, like, once again, it's not matter of fact. It's like, you can't say, hey, this is by the law, this is what it is. But we said, hey, we have this observation, and we're inclined to lean towards it, that this could be your grandmother, and things are still happening, or maybe it's residual, whatever. There is some tethering of your grandmother here, and just stop swearing, and don't open a line of communication, but make general statements, or stop swearing at it. And as soon as he stopped reacting badly, the activity stopped.
Mm. Nice. Uh, how do you feel about haunted objects? What's your take on those? Do you believe in like haunted objects, like Annabelle, stuff like that sort of thing?
I do, to a degree, because the fact that everything's a haunted object nowadays. Nowadays, you used to just go to an antique shop, and be able to buy antiques without everything single one of them being haunted. Maybe most objects do have a story to tell, and it's like stealing the John Zaffis thing and the Sam Baltrusis that say that. But I think sometimes objects are once emotional tethers to humans, that either love those objects, or use those objects a lot, and sometimes that tethering of that emotion or some of their consciousness is still a part of that. So when you bring in something, maybe activity happens around it. But the fact that everything's haunted is always a hard pill for me to swallow. I do believe it exists because from early civilizations, um, people tethered things to items. A popular one being the effigy, poppet, voodoo doll objects used in ritual that is a form of connection to the spiritual connection of the person. So, we have this interpretations through a history of objects being contained with things. Another famous one is the Hindu belief and Tibetan monk belief of using a furba dagger, which is a dagger in ritual in their culture, which absorbs the spirit, and then they either stab in a bowl of rice or stab it into something and disperse the demon, basically destroys them into the ethos. So the idea of objects containing spirits or being binded to spirits, binded to objects, I mean spirits being binded to objects, has been around for a long time. It's past many generations of human culture. So to me, in that essence, there is a possibility that exists. I've had dealt with objects myself, um, where I thought they might have been an issue, and then I bury them on holy land or throw them in a body of water, or might give them to somebody. There was a item that I gave to John Zaffis. I was called in by a group that was dealing with the museum, and they believed to have found the object that was causing this. And I was the mediator, and I investigated the museum with them, and then facilitated the object transfer to John Zaffis, like legitimately with paperwork and everything, a paper trail. And so, once the object was removed from that museum, the activity stopped. People stopped experiencing things.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
The reason why I asked that was because I was recently went on a coach tour, like last year, or like late last year, early this year. I can't exactly remember when, but one of the places that I went to supposedly had this haunted bench, is what they called it. They actually called it the ghost bench. The reason why wasn't because anybody died on there, but because you could see faces in the wood and stuff. So they believed the bench was haunted. But
Mm.
so when I was sitting over there, I actually got photos of the bench and stuff that I could email you to see them. But I went over there and I sat down. I felt bad for the tour guide because she gave me a free tour just because I knew a little bit of the history of the location. And she goes, I'm gonna take him down to see the ghost bench. I'm like, I'm gonna sit on it too. And she started freaking out. And she's like, I'm leaving. He's wanting to go sit on the ghost bench. I'm like, what are they gonna do to me? You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
I have a similar situation, involved in like a possible demonic case is um the movie Hostage to the Devil. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's based on the book Father Malachi Martin, but Hostage to the Devil was directed by Marty. I can't think of his name, but he's an Irish guy. And so they wanted to make it a Hostage to the Devil Part 2. And the merits of the story, much different than the first one, was the second one. And I signed an NDA, but this was
mhm.
many, many years ago and that never materialized. So I'm going to speak about it. Um, the merits of the story was, and when I say story, like true life scenario, was that the childhood friend of Annalise McKell, one of the most famous possession cases, which incorporated into her death due to malnutrition. Um, the childhood friend of Annalise McKell somehow was gifted her bed, the bed that she died on, and it's this woman, the friend of Annalise McKell that somehow inherited her bed, started experiencing things, and the idea of the movie was getting her help and trying to get her from Germany to the United States to get an exorcism done. But the problem of it and why it fell apart is because Marty wanted the exorcism to be filmed, and no true exorcist of the Catholic Church will allow you to film them while they're doing the solemn rite of exorcism, which is over a possessed individual. So that was the failure of it because unfortunately, parts of Europe, including Germany, are very strict on the solemn rite of exorcism. One due to Anneliese Michel's death, and then much later, another death occurred. So it's not truly looked upon there as a means to help somebody, even though if you're a part of the church, it is, you know, part of the sacramentals. And so the whole point of that was that she inherited this bed and started experiencing things internally and externally, and there was actually footage that she recorded of herself, and one of them, she was in bed and you saw the sheet go up like something was crawling in bed with her. It was pretty eerie. Like, there was definitely valuable data there, and I believe truly she was experiencing something. So but that, to me, likely was connected to the bed, all that traumatic uh, energy or consciousness or whatever connected to that bed, or maybe even the lingerance of what she dealt with, if truly what she dealt with was demonic. But it's fascinating. So, in that essence, if she never inherited that bed, would that circumstance have happened?
Sorry, I was just laughing at one of my moderators just posted. Ryan was saying, "It's look like you could be brothers."
Yeah, we're the paranormal twins.
So, speaking of like exorcism and stuff, have you ever came across a case where you actually think that the person could be possessed by a demon?
Yeah, my first one, wholeheartedly, face triangulated, the cheekbones triangulated. I mean, eyes went black. The strength that you hear of, um, yeah, I definitely experienced it. Did what I could do. It kind of fell from my hands, unfortunately, due to circumstances. But yes, I do believe wholeheartedly people can get possessed. It is, as my co-host of my podcast, Nine Gates podcast, Victoria J, demon folklorist, she likes to use the word infinitesimal, which is less than 1%. I like to say very rare, but yeah, no, it's super rare. But the times I have come across it, um, not many. I've only probably dealt with five true demonic cases in my lifetime of doing my lifetime, my time of doing this, and it may be two more that I question to this day. I've dealt with cases where curses might have been involved and negative spirits might have been involved, but nothing that I would qualify as demonic. Maybe in the layman's terms of demon, because if you look up the dictionary word of demon, it says evil spirit, and if a person can be evil, then that doesn't deny them the fact that they're an evil spirit if that's what they are, as a spirit. So it could be loosely termed, right, based on definition. But so in essence, but true demonic cases, I would say five, and then maybe two of those. The second one more questionable. I would say more towards the late stages of oppression than
Mhm.
possession, where I've experienced it. But I also know compadres in demonology that have come across it many times, and have worked with the Catholic Church with an exorcist, hand in hand, and have experienced it. And so my experience is similar to a lot of those experiences. And so that's why I would tend to believe it was real. And I always say that all the demonic cases that I've ever been, and I always get made in front of, because I'm like, I don't say I'm a sentient, clairaudient. I'm not psychic or medium. I have the gift of discernment, I do believe. And in the true demonic cases, it was an icky feeling. It
Mhm.
was like walking, imagine in imagination, because I've never walked through quicksand, but seeing it on National Geographic and all that fun stuff, and understanding the concept of it and what it does, I incorporate it to feel like walking through quicksand or a very muddy plain, like where you're drudging, and the fight or flight kicks in. That is a physical reaction with adrenaline and sometimes being scared. So that fight or flight kicks in, and then you feel like you're getting punched in the solar plexus over and over again. So it's like those things were pretty common on those couple cases, right? And that's what also makes me equate to believe that it was beyond of course, the data, the observation, and that was one of the commonalities I've seen in those cases, that those feelings and that dreadful feeling and knowing something's not right here, um, without the bias in play, was pretty effective in understanding some of the circumstances.
Yeah, my dog sometimes gets the feeling that something isn't like right. Because the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm fortunate enough to live in a neighborhood supposedly that has had like weird stuff happening there. I believe that the reason why it's happening is the land. Mainly because a Civil War skirmish supposedly took place in the area, and as also I was hiking like in the woods back behind the house, and maybe like about 9 minutes out into the woods behind that. So I was pretty deep, like maybe 2 miles or so into the woods, and I found what appears to be an undiscovered Native American burial mound out here too.
Yeah,
So you could see like where the stairs used to be, but nature kind of just like took over it. So it's like, but you can still see the indentions in it, but it's
yeah,
more of a hill going down into a trail going around a huge mound.
yep,
But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because my dog. There's one area in my grandparents' house. My grandparents and this house both has a little bit of somewhat activity going on, but it's nothing negative or anything like that. It's more residual, is what I'm
hmm,
thinking it is. And, but there's this one area in my grandparents' house where most of the orb activity that we capture takes place. And my dog, even if I have like the good duck jerky treats in my like hand or something, trying to get her to go back there with me,
yeah,
she she absolutely refuses to go into the hallway for that in my grandparents' house.
yeah.
So what I'm getting to is, how do you feel about animals being able to pick up on the
Yeah, so dogs and cats more specifically, because that tends to be the more common house pet than other animals. But, cats are known to have high senses, dogs are known to have extrasensory abilities as well, either when it comes to hearing or smelling, and even taste. I guess sometimes the taste is questionable if they eat their own poop. But but I definitely think that it is possible. I've seen it. I've heard enough stories about it where animals react. Some of my negative cases, either the dogs or cats, would either comfort the person when something was happening, like they knew, or they would bark like something was there, or would be skittish and stray away from a certain area that was maybe being proclaimed to be where most of the activity was happening. So I definitely think animals definitely have some sort of extra sensory perception, and I just think that because of not only natural science stating that to a degree, but the fact that the experiences that I've had with animals in clients' homes, or stories I've heard from um, people that I work alongside in this field, and of course earlier experiences, especially early cultures, elevated animals to a high echelon, right? Especially tribalism and Native American beliefs, and a lot of early paganism, and of course modern paganism as well. But a lot of mythologies incorporated, like the lion to be God or the goat to be uh, the Lamb of God. So like, there's always these interpretations of animals being a big figure to the spiritual ability of a human. So I definitely think there is some truth to it.
Mhm.
To a degree, like what it is and how it happens, what they're sensing, and what a spirit or a ghost is, or anything like that, is like, if I answered that, I'd be lying to everybody. So, but I definitely think that they can sense things, and sometimes have a good understanding of what's going on. And actually, I just watched a recent movie on that, where the dog was experiencing the haunting from the dog's perspective. I can't think, Good Dog or something like that. It was such a phenomenal movie. Like, it was scary because it was like you didn't know what was going to happen. It kind of little turned far fetched at the end, but the progression of the movie until the end was like, this is interesting. Like, kind of being a dog and experiencing that, what would they experience? I thought it was a great interpretation of what possibly animals, such more specifically cat and dogs, kind of experience.
Guys, if you have any questions for James, please put a capital Q in the chat and I'll pull it up on stage and ask him. Because, like I said, these are just all right off the top of my head now. I only have like a sheet of like 4 or 5 questions and we zoom through those. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, no, I tend to elongate my answers because I love the subject. But yeah, no, if we have nothing necessarily to talk about, I definitely want to tell people that I do have two books out there, The History of Demonology and The Psychological Dimensions of the Paranormal. And, those are on Amazon. I think a lot of what we're talking about tonight kind of gets a little bit more involved in depth to a degree about these subjects. The psychological dimensions of the paranormal looks at it through multiple different lenses, approaches it unbiasedly. It gives you why people could be skeptical and why you could be a believer. And the history of demonology kind of talks about that, that earlier question about demonology advancements, or similarities to older times, is the fact where history evolves is demonology. So I have those two books out there. I don't promote them much unless I'm on a podcast, but I think that from what people told me, that you should read it, right? I believe you should read it because I wrote it and it's like my babies. But I think that you'll learn stuff, and I also think the books allow you to read. I also have an extensive bibliography at the end, so allows you to access more points of reference and other books that I find far superior than my books, of course. But smart people, and read those books. Knowledge is power, right? And the more you learn, the better you could attempt to apply it in this field of unexplained, unexplained, and I don't knows.
very true. So, we got time for a couple more questions, right?
Yeah, I think Sir Spookfest has a question. I definitely he's been harping on shadow figures, and I love the topic of shadow people.
So, Ryan, let's see. Have you ever witnessed a full body apparition or shadow person? So,
So I would say the one true time that I would say that I experienced a shadow person or an apparition or a manifestation would be actually in your neck of the woods, Old South Pittsburgh Hospital.
cool.
uh, and it was a group event. There was a lot of great people there, some very talented investigators, and a lot of things went haywire that night. It was a night where I saw a scratch manifest right in front of me on a person's neck without them touching it. We saw, instead of shadow people, we saw light figures, li- like a white shadow person. Um, not on camera, so my experience, so believe it or not, but other people experienced it too, probably probably about a dozen people did. And so um I would say that is the true authentic time that I ever experienced an apparition, a shadow person. But I dealt with a case in Cumberland, Rhode Island, where it was actually I wasn't on it, but the case was on it. A show called My Ghost Story, which is no
Mhm,
longer around, and the episode or the part of the episode, because My Ghost Stories had multiple different pieces on the episode, but the part of the episode that my case was involved with, which was done by ECPRT, that brought me in. They actually, I do believe that to be a case of demonic infestation, and they actually on their DVR setup, back in the
mhm,
day, we used to set DVRs up and run wire, and they put the camera facing the doorway from all the way from the back, and the room was one of the places where they said they experienced activity. And on the camera, you see this has to be higher than the door frame, which I think is a little over 7 feet, maybe a little. Yeah, probably. I think they're about 7 feet two. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a carpenter. I don't know what code is for a door height. I should know, even though I work in construction. But but this figure, like the head, basically uh, was a little over the door jamb, the top of the door jamb, and it walks past the door and then walks past and looks into the room, and then it disappears, right? You see it looking walking down the stairs, and then it disappears. And so I find that interesting because I thought that to be a demonic infestation case, and that was caught on camera on or video. And so in some case, even though I didn't see it in person, it was actually captured in a case that I truly believe was demonic infestation. So that gave it credence of what was actually occurring there. But it was
mhm.
interesting to experience that, while not physically or personally, like quantifying the fact that this can be recorded and these things that do appear and people have witnessed it. And in that case and situation, we happen to capture it. So I would say, in my uh, essence, that's the few cases. But a lot of haunted locations, at the corner of your eye, you'll see something dart off. Oh, there actually no, that's a lie. There is actually one more that I want to add, and I can't believe I always forget about it. But on the USS Salem in Quincy, Massachusetts, one of the known apparitions that appear to people is called the Peaker. And my son saw it. I saw it. A couple other people, my friend Jeffrey Scott, saw it. I believe I'd have to find it, but we took a picture of it, and you actually see a figure. My son actually is the one that pointed it out at first, and I thought, well, it's his imaginations. He's young, but then I saw it. You saw this like head and like shoulders, solid dark. And Don DiCristofaro, who runs the ship, can actually cement this and say this is a true phenomenon that happens on the ship. And I believe he was even there that night. I don't know if he experienced it, but we relayed it to him. This experience that a good chunk of people saw, and it was something leaning, in a battleship, or that is a heavy cruiser, but they have these big U-shaped bulkheads, right? Like that you got to step over to get to each section of the boat, and you saw this thing peaking, and so it was fascinating. I would say on that ship, I've had more experiences of that than most of my time of ever investigating without questioning it, because like I said, you can look at the corner of your eye and believe you see a shadow person or a shadow darting, and a lot of the times it's our either light or our eyes playing tricks on us, or even our brain. So it's hard to always say that truly happened, but there have been many situations where on the corner of my eye I see something, but when that happens, it's hard to say it was paranormal.
Yeah, it's always like right out of your peripheral vision too. Like it looks like it's there, but then you go in another second and you're able to see what it was. So
Yeah.
Brian was just saying, very interesting. Thanks. He's witnessed a few over the years, and one of his first one was undeniable. Him and seven of his friends experienced a kid run into, run, like smack through a wall at
Mm.
an abandoned building, and they went around the building to look to see if anything was there or if anybody could get in, and no one was there. So, and
Yeah, it's interesting, especially that he claimed a Bridgewater Triangle as well. You know, that is um, very well known spot of phenomena, you know, of all different calibers, demonic cases, alien UFO sightings, Thunderbirds. You know, they have the famous right in the middle, the Hockomock Swamp, which is known to have a Native American curse on the land. The Bridgewater Triangle, you know, I live not too far from it, and I actually work in Fall River, which is basically right on the uh, right close to the edge of it. Um, is that, you know, I've had a bunch of cases in that area, to be honest, and I've investigated a lot of the locations within it that are historical or folklore or legends. And you know, it is interesting. I've had people that have seen shadow figures walk in the woods in the Bridgewater Triangle, and you know, shadow people phenomena is pretty quantified in that as well, with the hauntings that have been experienced in that specific perimeter of land.
that's really interesting. I never seen like a shadow figure or anything, but I don't know if you heard of this place or not. It's kind of like a civil. Well, it actually is a Civil War battlefield, but it's not as famous as Gettysburg. But it's called Shiloh Battlefield.
I've heard of it, but never been there.
Okay, well, so over like 3,000, like in total, Confederate and Union soldiers died there, and I was just walking down like this place that they called the Thunder in the Thicket because it was like this really, really long trail that had all the cannons and stuff like set up and everything. And so I was like filming, but I was filming it in like a portrait mode, kind of like facing like how the phone is facing me on my right now, you know?
Hmm.
I was like sitting there talking about some of the claims that was going on, like supposedly on this like little stretch and
Hmm.
everything. And one of the claims was like phantom footsteps and everything. And right as I said phantom footsteps, I see what appears to be a washed out version of like a Civil War soldier, like go like towards the cannon. But I didn't realize that's what I actually saw at the time because when I was sitting there, it was like you said, it was out of the corner of the eye when it happened. And I was just sitting there. I was like, I think I just see somebody like walking up behind me. And then I went over there. I'm a tracker and everything. I learned how to track in the woods while I'm out there hiking and stuff. So I actually went and looked around the cannon where I actually saw the figure to see if any like recent human activity like went over there. And I didn't see a single footprint, foot track of any kind over there. So what I saw was just like there and gone. It was like
Mm,
kind of like over my head, and I'm like 6 foot tall, and it was like over my head where it was at. So it was pretty tall, like it was floating almost.
that's interesting for sure. I can see why. You know, there's been a lot of sightings at battlefields or locations of heavy trauma and bloodshed. You know, so yeah, it's interesting, but it's believable that you experience something, because a lot of people do tend to experience things at places like that. So.
One of my final questions for you is: so I noticed while I was doing some research on you and stuff that you investigated the Mercy Brown case, which is like one of my favorite stories from up in that area. Is it true that it's mainly just like a tuberculosis scare from back then?
Yeah, it was tuberculosis. Unfortunately, she like I think it was Tillenhouse or whatever. There's four, 3 or 4 predominant vampire legends in Rhode Island, and you know, I actually got the. Oh, my thing just fell. But what is it called? I actually have a book on it. Let me see. Where the hell is it? Um, sorry, give me. Oh, right here. Tom D'Agostino, great author. Um, History of vampires in New England. So there were definitely many claims of vampires in the New England area, and Mercy Brown is one the most famous because it was the first proclaimed vampire legend in America. If I do believe that to be correct, and I could be proven wrong on that, but Mercy Brown. Was like the first true thought that she was a vampire based on certain biological reactions to the body being buried that they didn't know at the time. And we, later in time figured this out. And tuberculosis really at that time was like not treatable in any true essence, and it really was misunderstood. You see this with the tuberculosis pandemic much later on in our history, where lots of people died. Waverly Hills is most famous for that, being a tuberculosis a sanitarium
Hmm.
and sanatorium, sorry. And uh and so yes, she really wasn't a vampire, but the fact of it that the legend kind of materialized the vampire folklore in America is quite fascinating, and to be so close to it, I feel bad for Mercy Brown because throughout the time her grave has been decimated, and uh, it's sometimes crazy how people get when it comes to certain folklores and legends. But yeah, Mercy Brown's a Rhode Island legend, and most people have heard of Mercy Brown and don't realize the impact it had on U.S. history.
Very true. Ryan wants to know one more thing before we wrap it up. He wants to know, what is your YouTube channel if you have one?
Yeah, so it's Nine Gates Podcast. It is once a month episode topic based show. Victoria J is a master's in folklore. She's known as the demon folklorist because her concentration is classifications and, of course, media of demons and folklore of demons. And so I, as the demonologist, the other side, I've applied it. I've been in the field, focused more on demonology than she does, but we talk and bring on guests of specific topics that involve the demon ethos, either through folklore, mythology, through pop culture. And yeah, we have it once a month. Our next episode will be September 1st. The topic is investigating the demonic, and our guest would be Dave Giuliano, who was the creator of Shadowlands, the first paranormal website at the boom of the internet, and as well in the field for 40 plus years. He'll be our next guest. But yeah, Nine Gates Podcast. I think if anybody that's fascinated in demonology or demonic folklore or theology or even the paranormal in general and have questions about demons, it's a good show to watch because we really get down nitty and gritty, try to get away from the misconceptions a lot of people have, and lay out what people have experienced and what research shows, not what just opinion shows.
Very true. I am definitely going to sub to your channel after the show's over with. And we have officially reached the hour and 3 minute mark. I just wanted to say thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule for coming on to my show and hanging out with
Yeah, thank you for having me. I don't think I called it out on the show, but I love to share it. We were talking a little bit before it. Nice choice for the topic tonight. But I appreciate you having me on. Some great questions, actually all good questions, and I hope to be on again in the future.
you. Of course, you're more than welcome on in the future. I'm always down for returning guests.
Awesome.
And if you guys need a person that doesn't sugarcoat true haunted history on your show, just holler at me. I'll be down.
I love it.
All right. Have a good one, man. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah.